Hello, everyone. My name is Gabriella Biello, and I have the pleasure of being one of Kara Swisher's student associates this semester. Growing up, I always heard the phrase, never judge a book by its cover. But no one ever said we can't judge it by its author. In a world where technology shapes every facet of our lives, Kara Swisher has been a guiding force, fearlessly navigating the complexities of the digital age. As a renowned journalist, podcaster, and author, Kara has dedicated her career to dissecting the intersection of technology, business, and society with unparalleled insight and wit. This week, while reading the New York Times, I saw the review of Burn Book. The author starts by describing Kara Swisher in college, saying she was an ambitious, outspoken, hyper-confident young woman struggling to make her way in a world that was practically designed to hold her back. And now, as a college student here in DC, just like Kara was, it brings me so much joy to look out into this crowd and see that there are still so many young, ambitious, outspoken, hyper-confident women who are here today to learn from those who have done it already. Throughout her career, Kara Swisher has been a relentless advocate for transparency, accountability, and ethical governance in the tech industry. Her fearless pursuit of truth and justice has earned her the respect of her peers and the admiration of millions around the globe. Whenever I get the pleasure of hearing her stories or parts of her book, it inspires me and gets me excited about the future because she is proof that change and accountability in tech is possible. Today we have the privilege of celebrating Kara's latest achievement, her groundbreaking new book titled Burn Book, A Tech Love Story. Kara delves deep into the inner workings of the tech industry, exposing the triumphs, the scandals, and the pivotal moments that have shaped our digital world. With what we have all come to know as her signature blend of incisive analysis and razor-sharp wit, Burn Book offers a captivating journey into the heart of Silicon Valley and beyond. But this is more than just a celebration. We are also here today to engage in a lively discussion led by another trailblazer. Audie Cornish is an award-winning journalist and anchor and host of The Assignment on CNN, where she brings her unique perspective and probing questions to the forefront of American conversation. Audie's depth, insight, and grace embodies the values the Sign Institute promotes each day, and we are thrilled to welcome her. Together, Kara Swisher and Audie Cornish represent the very best of journalism. Fearless, intelligent, and unapologetically honest. As they take the stage today, I have no doubt that we are in for an enlightening and thought-provoking discussion that will leave us all inspired and informed. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Kara Swisher and Audie Cornish to the stage.
Hi everybody. How are you? Good morning. Good morning. Come on, you don't want to bring this energy to Kara Swisher, okay? Because that's not what you're going to get back. Good morning. Good morning. Nice. I'm Audie Cornish. I'm host of The Assignment from CNN. Kara Swisher is, of course, the person you're here to see. And the reason why I wanted to talk to Kara, just as she's like a reporter's reporter. And obviously, she's been chasing down all of these titans of Silicon Valley for a long time and documenting not just their rise, but like the moment that we're in now as we're reckoning with what that rise hath wrought. She's also the host of On with Kara Swisher and Pivot with her co-host Scott Galloway, two amazing podcasts, so I have to shout those out. And she's an on-air contributor at CNN. And she, of course, is a 2024 fellow here at the Institute. So, Kara, thank you so much.
Thank you. And I want to say Audie's a good friend of mine, too.
Yeah,
but
we're
she's also,
fast friends. I didn't know what that term meant until I got a fast friend.
Yeah, and I really admire the work she's doing. And you know where we met? When I gave you that award in New York.
That can't be where we met,
That's where we met. Anyway, we did. We were trying to figure. She has an app that an AI app.
We were asking the question. It was asking the question. Name a friend who you know, who you can't remember how you met.
Yeah.
And I realized it was Kara. And I have to say, it made me not want to do this interview with you today.
Okay. All right. Good. Why?
Because I feel like I'm too close to you to do the interview properly.
Oh, all right, okay.
But I felt like you were then the right person to talk to, because your whole career is talking to people that you might be a little too close to.
Some of them.
Some of them.
Some of them, yeah. Yes, that's a good point. So let's go.
The other thing about Kara, which I've told her, is you talk to men the way men talk to women.
Yes, yeah. Some men.
Some,
men.
but
She
do
said
any of you
this.
guys know what I'm talking about? When I say that, does that mean something to you?
She said that. She was a guest host on Pivot, I think it was when you said that, and you said that to me, and so many people were like, that's exactly what's happening here. And as I thought about it, it was really interesting because I was talking to my wife, Amanda's here also, and she was talking to a man, and I said, this is how you do it. You compliment him. Men aren't used to physical compliments, and you say, that's a nice shirt. So I do that. I do kind of do that a lot. But then if I really want to really get stuff out of them, I actually neg a lot of these men I covered. And I'm like, did you lose weight? Because you were fat last time I saw you, you know, like stuff like that. And I realized I came in from San Francisco last night where I did a series of sessions with Reid Hoffman, Sam Altman, Gavin Newsom, and I did it. I was negging them without even trying, and it was really interesting.
So I'm fascinated by this, and I was reading the book looking for your villain origin story, like trying to figure out how you got to be what, you know, as a student, she identified strident, confident. In the book, sometimes you use the word arrogant, talking about yourself even as a young person. And I think that there's something to the fact you're running against a lot of cultural programming as kind of a femme, you know, woman identifying person. You're going to hear a lot about how you should be. Yes. And you aren't any of those things.
No, I would say I'm the exact opposite of Katie Britt as her performance last night.
Was the senator from Alabama who gave the State of the Union response?
I was literally like, she to me in that thing was ChatGPT, show me a Stepford wife in a kitchen. And who doesn't like Republicans and didn't win the lead role in Our Town in high school. And so,
because with ChatGPT, you do have to be distinct with the prompts.
Yes, very distinct, actually. So how did you want to know how I got the way I got?
Well,
yeah. Okay, the origin.
What are your theories?
You know, it's interesting. Probably, I think I was born this way because when I was a kid, and again, the names were put on you as a girl if you were like this. But my nickname as a baby was Tempesta, which is it's an Italian word for tempest, right? That I was not easy. I wasn't go along, get along. And I'm not sure what that meant because did I cry too much? No, not really. It was headstrong is the word they might use. And then later, when I was in school, it was bossy or too confident is what I used to get a lot as a kid and as an adult working. And it was really interesting because...
I love that last one, too confident.
Well, interesting. And up to this day, I did an interview, and it is almost always from men. It was, not always, but almost always. But an interviewer who I competed with quite a bit back in the day and used to beat on a regular basis said I had uncommon confidence, which I found incredibly irritating. And I said to him right when he did it, I was like, uncommon, why? And he was like, well, not everyone's confident. I'm like, why is that unusual? What am I supposed to be, you know, rich, shy, and retiring? Am I supposed to be submissive? Like, what is going on here? Normally submissive is the opposite of uncommonly confident, right? And so it was, I don't know why it was, but I do think, one, I was like this. Two, may have been about being gay. I knew I was gay at an early age.
Interesting.
And so I didn't feel like I needed to have the approval of men. I think girls get into that quite a bit pretty early. I like men, so I also like men. And so I always got along with men at every stage of my career and teachers and everything else. And then probably my dad dying, I think, made me tougher, because you sort of had to be. My dad died when I was 5. And so if I think back on it, I really did get steeled during that period. My mom married someone who wasn't very nice. I'm not Cinderella here, but
No. You do the same thing in the book, though, as you start to speed past that point of the story.
I do.
And I want to know, I mean, you were only 5. We both have kids around that age now.
That's correct.
And it does bring you back to that place.
It does. I had, and before that, I have older kids, too. And I remember there's 2 points in my life that were really important when I passed the age my dad died at. That was interesting because I didn't think I'd live past that. So I kind of lived my life in a rush. because I thought I would die at that age. I think that's very common among people whose parents die early. And my brothers are the same way. We're like in a rush. We have no time for this. And then I really did, when my son turned, my oldest son, he's 21 now, turned 5, I realized the devastation. I really did. I was like, God, he knows me so well. And, you don't have memories. I don't have a lot of memories of my dad. I've always thought I should get hypnotized or something, which I haven't done. But I have little pieces of memories.
Yeah, because that's the age where those
how well
start to be shaped,
right? But how well does my 4-year-old know me, my 2-year-old? Like, would they remember me? Maybe not. But the devastation, but we have clear relationship every single day, and they're deep. And so the devastation was very clear to me then. I remember being struck when that happened, when he turned the age I was, because it was clear that I was much more hurt than I realized. But you've covered up pretty quickly. A lot of people whose parents die at a young age become something that Irving Yalom calls highly functional. He was a psychiatrist. He wrote a really good book. And he wrote a book called The Loss That Is Forever, about people whose parents die at a young age. And I do remember that was when I realized how good I was at not glossing over, because I don't think.
Moving forward.
Moving forward. I don't think, years ago, a friend of mine was in one of those therapies where you talk to someone every day. And we were talking about it, and I was like, what in the world do you find to talk about? Like, I don't have that, I'm not that interesting. Like, what parts of your life could you find? And they turned to me and said they were going to become a therapist, so that's why they do it. And I said, I just don't have that much to talk about. I just don't feel like I would have something to talk about every day for hours about myself. And they said, you're blocking. And I said, it's working. Because I'm pretty happy. Like, I was like, where's the depths? And, my wife talks about it a lot. Like, I said, when I met her, I said I wasn't, neurotic. I said, I don't have any neuroses.
That's not your vibe.
No, it's not. But it really isn't. Either it's there, and I've hit it so beautifully, like I'm like a mafia don, and the cement is deep.
Yeah,
and
the sunglasses help.
And Jimmy helps. Yeah, I'm trying to avoid intimacy with you.
Exactly.
I forgot my other glasses.
But it does make me think about this stepdad, because you have this person who comes into your life, but you describe him in extremely specific ways in the book. You use phrases like casually cruel, manipulative. You don't describe him as abusive, so I don't want to give that. You do feel that?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Can you describe what it was? Because you were so young. So by the time you're 10, 11, what are these interactions?
It was not physically abusive. It's everyone always, you tend not to minimize mental abuse, right? But it was abusive. My dad had a dog that I vaguely recall, but I remember this dog was a basset hound named Prudence, and my stepfather got rid of it. It disappeared one day. Can you imagine your dad's dog going? And didn't explain it. And when I was slightly older, he made up stories of what he did with it. Like, he's like, oh, I dropped it in the river and all this stuff. It was so cruel.
And are these happening when
I'm a
it's
child?
Just kids with him? Is mom around?
Mom is around, and she let it happen. Yes, she absolutely let it happen. And to be kind to her she's this young person with 3 kids, and their husband died, and she got married pretty quickly. I get it. I get that kind of thing. But she let him do it. He was very, one thing is he was a game player. He loved strategy games, whatever it was. And so I got very good at, like, backgammon. I was really good. But I don't play it. I don't like it. And I'm good at it. It's really weird because it was so aggressive. He taught me in such an aggressive way. And I was also, interestingly, really good at it. Like, I actually did have those qualities of a sort of a killer-like sense of game playing.
By the way, we just heard the word killer in the context of backgammon.
Yeah.
So we have an idea of what these games are like.
Yes, you can do, but it is.
Yeah,
it
is.
I must win and dominate. So he did teach me those. He had those qualities, which is a good thing. He had a very strategic mind, and I would say you can learn good things in a bad way, right? And he would do all kinds of things. He bugged our house. He was paranoid, and we used to find humor in it because my brother and I would always make fake drug deals over the phone. We're like, did you get the pound of hash,
Because you knew he could hear?
Yes.
In that
And
like
then-
80s, 90s way of your parents are listening on the other line?
Yes,
Or he had
no,
bugged your phone?
He put bugs, yeah, like Nixon. He's like Nixon, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So I'm not going to armchair psychiatrist this, but it does, to me, uniquely prepare you for Silicon Valley.
It did, it did.
But
Yeah,
also,
I say I'm a pessimist, I'm an optimistic pessimist. I really do think the worst is going to happen, and then when it doesn't, I'm like, yay, it did.
I know. But it also, you describe a number, I want to talk about some of the people you encountered in the early part of your career. You're a young person, you're at school, you decide for a variety of reasons as you are kind of cut off from doing what you want to do, right? Joining the armed services, specifically the CIA.
That was really a disappointment for me. I wanted to be in the military very much. My dad was in the military. He had just gotten out when he died. He's in the Navy. I wanted to be in the Navy. I have a lot of family members on his side in the Navy, actually. And I really wanted to. I have a great patriotic streak. I have a real belief in America, and
But you not doing it is somehow at odds with how I think of you.
Really?
Like, why didn't you just do it?
Because I had to lie. Because this is even before Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It was you got kicked out and on dishonorable discharge, because I'm that old. And then there was Don't Ask, Don't Tell was another opportunity, and I was like, I ask and I tell, so that's a problem. I
That you knew you wouldn't be able to do it.
It was so offensive, even more than just kicking people out. That was Clinton. That was a Clinton era thing. That was so offensive to me. Don't ask, don't tell. So I couldn't do that. And then years later, when they finally got rid of everything, I wanted to join the reserves, but I was actually too old. So I never got a chance to do it. I thought about joining the CIA. I went to the Foreign Service School. It was a feeder to the CIA and the State Department. Both things, at the time, there was the Clayton Lone Tree scandal. You should look it up. There was all this Russians manipulating Americans that lived in Russia. I didn't even speak Russian, so I don't know why they were so concerned. But when I went for some of the interviews, they were like, you could be blackmailed. I'm like, I'm out. And they were like, but you could be blackmailed. And I was like, but I'm out. It was like these discussions, like they were ridiculous.
Yeah.
But they were very obsessed with gay people at that time and finding out. And I was like, there's nothing to find out. Well, at one point they were like, well, what if you went to Saudi Arabia? They kill gay people here. And I'm like, I don't speak Arabic, but okay.
Why would you send me there?
Why would you send me there? Like,
how did this shape how you think about discrimination, how you think about those kinds of things?
Furious, because it was also the era of the AIDS era, and it was during the Reagan administration. I was in college then, and I was furious about how they treated people with AIDS, and I think a lot of people became activated then.
Yeah.
Gay people were like,
also, when you face discrimination, I don't know about you, but it makes you feel that identity more acutely.
Yes.
Even if you were strutting
Well,
around your
people
life.
made you.
Yeah, they're
People
telling
made you.
you,
You don't
guess
wanna-
what, you're not out of this box.
right, and with gay people you can hide, right? With race and if you're Jewish, you can't hide as easily. And so the two problems, and I'm not going to stack rank anyone's discrimination, but one is you can hide, but you have to be furtive, which really was terrible. I can't even tell you how terrible that was. And I wasn't good at furtive, and I was very outspoken. And the other thing was your family can dislike you. Like your family discriminates against you. So it creates this weird thing, and your friends, and people didn't know a lot. It was such a different time. It really was. I can't, it's shocking the changes that have happened. But I wanted to have kids, and it was not open to you. That was not something that was open to you. And so I think a thing, I bought a baby, a onesie for my child at 18. I bought one. I was at Owings Mills Mall out here at a thing, and I bought it. I said, I'm having a kid, and I kept it. And he wore it. All the kids wore it. I think all 4 kids wore it. It's just really hard to be not who you are. And I really was who I was. And I came out pretty quickly. And the AIDS thing was it. I was like, that's fucking enough. That's enough with you people. People are dying. The Reagan administration was pretending people didn't have AIDS. You remember Rock Hudson, the whole thing. It was such nonsense. And, when things like Angels in America came out, I was like, exactly.
Yeah, but I think it's maybe hard for this generation to understand because they've grown up with activism at fingertips,
Yes,
right? Like very
yeah.
young people
Yeah.
are running major nonprofits.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
that was
I mean,
not
there's
like
the-
coming up. That was
It's its own set of challenges.
It
But
is.
for sure, it was hard. It was really hard. And you didn't have the internet. Like,
Right.
you know, my ex-boyfriend
building
Planet Out, which was
communities,
one of
yeah.
the first, AOL was one of the first gay communities where people could talk to each other and find each other. I remember Megan, who went on to join Google and then was the CTO of America, she had like 7 members of Planet Out that were from Vatican City, which was really interesting. But they were everywhere. That was the thing. They were people were everywhere and dying to meet each other. So, which is why the online space held such promise for me, like especially around gay people. It was real, or people that couldn't meet. Everyone from gay people to one of the first group I encountered was a group of quilters at AOL who had never met. They were just like quilting, and they were sort of alone in their little communities. And then they met online, and they made a giant AOL quilt with each other. And then Steve Case brought them all into to Dulles. They weren't in Dulles, they were in Vienna, to meet each other. They'd never met. And I remember thinking, this is a magical medium.
I know you talked about being able to download a lot of Calvin and Hobbes.
Yes, I
and
did,
that being
yeah.
exciting, getting a digital version.
It was a moment.
But this also sounds important, that the community aspect of
Absolutely.
the
I
internet
thought
kicked
it
off
was-
your love story,
It
so to
did. It
speak.
really did. I was like, my God, these people never met each other, and they had connection. And especially isolated. It was gay people and the quilters, because gay people, you couldn't reach out to each other, especially if you lived in the Midwest, if you lived in the South. But they were meeting. They were forming relationships online, and it was such a good aspect of it. It was such a wonderful thing. And you saw it everywhere. It was whether you had interests in, whatever you had interest in gaming or whatever.
Do you think, though, that there were ways that the tech industry kind of played on that community building
later.
to build their story around the consumer internet?
They did, but these communities created by themselves.
Yeah.
That's what it was. It wasn't them.
But when it starts to consolidate into basically a mall,
That's right,
Like as it
right.
starts to grow up and more people have access.
There's different, it reminded me of.
There was always talk about it in very utopian terms.
But it actually was. The early stuff really was. And I used to use the metaphor, now I'm just remembering, of stone soup. Do you remember that? Like, everybody puts something in. It's a community that's at odds with each other, and there's a war going on or whatever, and then this person creates stone soup. And that's what it felt like at the time. It really did. And this was before they got their dirty mitts on it and stuck advertising in there and tried to grow it. It really, all these FTP boards, people were very civil, very, very civil. Now, there was a whole pornography element, which I thought was okay. It was like fine.
It often drove a lot of
It did.
innovation,
Yes,
right?
one
Like a lot of
Yes. Oh, no.
apps or hardware.
Pornographers-
It was like, this is the way you
Hands-
got an audience for it right
Hands
away.
down, pornographers were the most innovative people in the early internet. They were.
I know, it sounds insane, but like the shopping cart, I think they were among the
they
do
created
that.
the shopping,
CD-ROMs,
the quick
yeah.
look of like look for 5 seconds and then pay.
Yeah.
All these innovations, and there was a woman. It was a lot of women, which was really interesting. And it was this woman, Dani Ash, who was the most downloaded woman on the internet. She was a porn star, but she also ran the company, and
Yeah.
it was really. We can get into whether exploited in this, but it was a different version of pornography. It was really interesting. And she was copied constantly. Every innovation she made, what a brilliant person she was. I brought her to, I think South by Southwest, which I'm going to tomorrow, or something like that, a version of that. And when I had her up there, of course, the audience, because I thought she was so innovative, I was like, this woman knows what's going on. And the payments was really interesting. She created a payment system.
Yeah.
And everyone, all the men, it was all men, and they all like. I was like, shut the fuck up. She's more entrepreneur in her finger than you have in all your whole bodies, And it was really interesting that they joked about it, but everything that happened in pornography would later be iterated. And one of the moments that I thought was interesting was there was a thing called M2M for sex.com. It was a matching service. And I know it sounds crazy, it was man-to-man to sex.com. And Craigslist was also heavy in this, also meeting and sex, not just sex, but meeting. And And what happened was, you said, it was in San Francisco, and it said, I'm a man who likes this kind of man, and I like to do this, and I'm here in this part of San Francisco. And the matching system would go, blah, 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 and then they'd meet. And I was riveted to this. I was like, you could do that with anything. It doesn't have to be sex. It's just these are highly motivated people. But you could do it for anything. And I called Jerry Yang at the time, and he was looking for ways to grow, Yahoo at the time. And I said, you need to buy m2mforsex.com. And he's like, what? And I said, no, this is so cool. And he's like, I don't want a porn service. I was like, no, it doesn't have to be a porn service, Jerry. It can be something else.
But it gets at you call it tech boosterism, right? Like,
I don't know about that. Yes.
Oh, but the idea that like this was an industry that
I should have bought it, but go ahead.
you were covering,
Yeah.
but you also believed in.
This
is the love story I'm
yes,
talking
I was
about.
an entrepreneur. I was an entrepreneur, and
you felt kinship with the industry.
I was always like, I did feel kinship around the good parts, which was entrepreneurship, changing, why is it like this? I had already had experiences at the Post, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal, where I was like, why are we doing it this way? What is the problem here? And I think, I used to stand in front of, there was a teletype machine. Have you ever seen All the President's Men? It goes, and people pull it off, and then they type a story. And I was like, why is this here? I'd stand in front of it. I'm like, why, get this out of here. We don't need this anymore. It's an anachronism. And they were like, get away from the teletype machine, Kara. And I was like, doesn't need to be here. And same thing with desk phones. I'm like, you're not going to have a desk phone. I wander over to people. I'm like, that's not going to exist, just so you know. You're going to have this giant, and I bring over the mobile phone, which was like, this is what you're going to use. They're like, I'm not using that. I'm like, oh, you're using that. And I do this.
But when did you start to feel, when did you start to feel that stone soup actually just had a bunch of rocks in it?
Yes.
Meaning, like, when did you start, as you're covering, because you're telling this story in the book of someone who, you're not just tapped in, you're going to the baby shower.
Right,
Which I'm glad you did, because it's the world's weirdest baby shower.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, my wife,
before people are wearing onesies.
by then worked there, so
Your wife works there, so you're deeply ingrained in the world that you're covering.
I tried not to socialize with them. I really didn't. I went to that because I wanted sourcing. It was a really good way to see what they were up to.
Can you source with people wearing diapers?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. In fact, you can. You needed to understand them because it was a whole new bunch of creatures, right? They were a whole new circus. And if you were covering Wall Street, you went to those things. You went to all the social things. If you're covering politics, welcome, you've been.
Yeah, but I think with bankers and politicians, everyone knows what you're getting into, and it's a crocodile mouth.
Right, exactly.
And somehow with tech, though, there was a lot of boy genius language. There was a lot of self-mythologizing.
Yes, not for me.
No, but the tech press, like, it was very look at this.
Yes, exactly. Yes, isn't this cool? Aren't they doing this?
Yes.
But one of the things that I actually...
And they were young.
Yes, they were
dudes
young,
doing
and
cool
it was
things.
different, and it was definitely different. We're going to do it differently. But actually, when I went back to look at stories, my first 6 or 7 stories were, here's the 10 things tech people say that aren't true. Like, we're saving the world. Everybody's equal. And I wrote, like, they're not equal. These people have control over their companies, and nobody shares. We're just casual guys in fleece. I said, in fact, it's the same version as a Gordon Gekko suit. I was quite cynical about it. I was surprised how cynical I was. I did a whole story about how they cosplayed with food. We just love burritos, I did an entire story about their stupid titles. Chief Yahoo, Chief Fun Officer. And I'm like, this is nonsense. And I wrote that in the Wall Street Journal. And I was often, like, I wouldn't bite on their little mythologies. Jeff Bezos in particular had a lot of them. And I remember being up there in Amazon. And I went with him to see their first office that they had at the time. And he had a door for a desk, right, on sawhorses. And he's like, I have a door for a desk. And I knew he wanted me to put it in the Wall Street Journal. And I was like, why do you have a door for a desk? We're here saving money. We're parsimonious. And I was like, IKEA costs not very much. Like, why are you doing this? Like, this costs
for the story.
Yes.
There's always a narrative being built around it.
And I refused to do it. They all had one, and one of them was Excite, had a slide from the 2nd to 3rd floor, and they wanted reporters to go down it and then write about it, and I refused to go down it, and I never wrote about it. I was like, I refuse. Except when I was mocking it, and then I would mock it quite a lot. They had a garage at the front, of the building, the very expensive building, to And I was like, why do you have that garage door? Do you have a car going in here? And they're like, no, it's to show our roots. I go, it's a fake garage door? And they were like, yes. And I was like, that's pathetic. Like, and so, and I didn't love all their toys. I made fun of their toys all the time because I thought they kept trying to cosplay childlike behavior.
Yeah.
And I thought it was childish.
A lot of juvenile stuff
There's a lot
masquerading
of yes,
as kind of
pogo
like
sticks.
next generation energy.
If you like to get on the bounce in the bounce house, I would not, stuff like that. And I thought it was silly. I thought some of it was interesting. Some of the office layouts were interesting, and I did think it did promote creativity.
Yeah, but you don't need a slide to have an open
No,
office.
no, never get on a slide.
That's just me.
I know. I can't imagine. I think you'd be like, no fucking way.
Why do you think they liked you? Did they see you as one of them?
No, and this was interesting. I don't think that, because I had been, I was at the Wall Street Journal, or at the Washington Post first, and they needed me, right? I don't think they saw, I wasn't an entrepreneur till 10 years later. I didn't leave the safety of the big newspaper until 2002, which was a long time I'd been
But the fact that you could call up someone and say, this is what I think you should do, this is what I think you should buy.
I would tell, this is what, I said I'm going to write this.
Okay.
I would tell them what I was going to do. They often didn't take my advice. Jerry did not, when I was writing the story of how I thought Google was going to take over Yahoo, and I said to Jerry, you're fucked. These guys are gonna eat you. And I said, you should take them off. And I didn't think he was going to do it. They never did. They never did what I said.
But I think they appreciated, again, we talked about how you talk to men. Was there something about the way you had those conversations? Because now I see an industry that's quite closed.
Yes.
It's very hard to talk to any of them for any reason. And I think that your stature in the
now I
industry,
do it
and you have the history.
Yes, now I do it in public. Like, I had a public argument with Mark Benioff about, he's like, I was like, Elon's doing this anti-Semitic, this anti-gay, this anti-trans. And Mark's like, what do you say to that? Because these are the values you said you held dear. And he said, he goes, well, he can land a rocket on a surfboard. And I was like, I don't understand. So he's a racist who can put a rocket on a surfboard. And what I was trying to get out there was like, you should say something. And I said it to him publicly in front of a crowd of 1,000 people. I said, why aren't you saying something publicly? I think you should. If you say you support gay people, you can't. This guy just said Paul Pelosi's in a gay love triangle, and that's how he got beaten up. Why won't you say anything? And his excuse was, well, he's really innovative. Like, we must excuse his sins for that. And so that's what it turned into. But by that time, I was, when I was at the Journal, I was a beat reporter, right? And at some point, you have to say, Google bought this happened. And the reason I left it was because I got so frustrated at doing an enormous amount of reporting. One particular time was Webvan. And I was like, this ain't going to work. And I wanted to say it in the Wall Street Journal. I wanted to just let that be the way I communicated it. And the editor said, get someone else to say what you think. And you know that, right?
That's very common.
Which is really common. And then they always had a thing in the Journal, they used this term, to be sure, some people say, that kind of thing, which I hate, and I was like, to be sure, some people are idiots. It's not true. And so that's why I started All Things D, because the minute we did All Things D, if you go back, we were like, this is a goat rodeo. Here's the reporting, here's the scoop, and then let us tell you why it's a goat rodeo, because we did the reporting for you.
What I'm interested in is the memoir you use this analogy of love,
Yes.
And love clouds your judgment.
It does, it can, but I love the tech, not the people. I loved the possibilities of technology more than anything, that there was I really did believe, and it probably was from being gay now that I think about it, it's like we can come out and meet each other now.
Were there red flags that you missed industry-wise in terms of how that culture was changing?
No, because I think we were on that a lot earlier when Google, I wrote a particular tough piece on Google about their need to be the Borg and take over everything. We wrote that in...
Which was not with the antithesis of don't be evil.
No, right? Yes, right, exactly. So we wrote a lot of those in 2001, 2002, saying this company is starting to turn into Microsoft. And they got mad at me for doing that. And they said, and we were saying if they do that, they will have unlimited power because this is where advertising is going and everything else. We were super tough on Yahoo's mistakes, Twitter, Uber. I think we helped get Travis Kalanick fired over that, because that was later. That was in the
There's a way
2013.
that, given when you started covering it and where you are now, that your experience kind of mirrors our own cultural
That's correct, yeah.
experience of the
Yes,
industry.
which I was trying to get at.
Yeah, good. Good. So I did the homework.
Here's what I would push
But just
back.
it
I
goes
should
from
push back. I was
grandiose
not-
utopia.
I was not a fanboy. I definitely was not those people.
But we all were, right? Like we
No,
were.
no.
I do think that we were sold not a bill of goods, but definitely there was a reverence for young tech leadership. They were bringing us something.
100%.
We were not talking about them like they were robber barons or railroad
No.
guys. Okay,
No.
it was very
No.
different.
No.
Whereas now, people do see them as insular,
correct.
reckless.
That's correct.
Self-aggrandizing billionaires.
Yes.
And I do feel like that is a shift.
But I don't think people heard it. We did an interview with Mark Zuckerberg where we ran over him so much that he almost sweat to death, right?
Infamous flop sweat,
Right.
yeah.
We
And the
were-
Social Network did that. and
Yes,
like,
but
yeah.
we had been pressing him about privacy and that Beacon. We were particularly tough about Beacon, and we're like, what are you doing? This is worse. Even Steve Case, at one point when he was collecting all this information, we were talking about the hacking, the possibilities of hacking it. And he was at one investor meeting, and he was bragging about how he made $63 each person, right? 63. I mean, that's what the data that they got, that you coughed up.
Because we're
to
the
him.
product.
That's correct. And I raised my hand and I said, "Where's my $30? Like, why are you taking my things without and not using it?" And I think one of the problems that it led to is this sort of which Scott Galloway calls the idolatry of innovators. And I think that's true.
That's a very good. Can you say that again?
Idolatry of innovators. I think you do that and then you excuse them for a lot of their sins. There's a lot of excuses because some of them are very gee whiz. Some of it is cool. When you first used the internet, it was like, what? Like, it was, anyone who would ever, and you guys don't remember this, maybe some of you do, the card catalog was dead. I was like, there's no card catalog anymore. There's no encyclopedia. There's no this. And so it is sort of that breathtaking moment of, say, using television for the first time or radio. You know, can you imagine listening to radio for the first time and never having heard it? It would be, it's wild. It's wild. And I think the key quote, there's two key quotes in the book, now that I'm thinking about it, was the Paul Virilio quote, which people are attracted to, which was, when you invent the ship, you invent the shipwreck. When you invent the plane, you invent the plane crash. And I think one of the things that happened was we were really enamored of the ships, and then we noticed all the shipwrecks. We started really writing, especially at All Things D, about the shipwrecks. And then it shifted into, why aren't there lighthouses? Who's stopping the lighthouses? Who's stopping the radar? Who laid all the electric, when you invent electricity, you meant electrocution. Who put the wires on the ground for all of us to touch? It shifted into that with reporters over time.
We're in this strange moment now with generative
AI.
artificial intelligence, AI, and you were recently talking to Sam Altman, who
Yesterday, last night, 12 hours ago, yeah.
But you also said that there needs to be a certain kind of personality in this next generation.
There does. There also needs to be an aggressive person, too. Like,
You said contemplative also,
he
right?
is much more so.
And this is not to pick on him in particular, but I feel like AI is being greeted with far more skepticism,
Yeah.
in some corners
100%.
panic.
A panic.
It's a very
But that's because
different...
it's science fiction, but go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, sure, but it's a very different, like, this is going to be so cool. We're going to get to do, but it's much more like, whoa,
Yes.
are the robots going to kill us all?
Yes.
And what are the lessons that you take from the last couple years of reporting into this next phase?
It's interesting because I'm in the middle. I'm like Dr. Fei Li. I'm in the middle. I'm like, and people are surprised. They're like, "Don't you want to stop this?" I'm like, "We could solve cancer." No, I don't. Like, again, I'm not. I don't think I'm too hopeful because I'm very aware of the dangers. I think what's good about this year is the actual makers of these things are contemplating the dangers of them. And honestly, the first person who talked about it with me 10, 15 years ago was Elon Musk. Was very worried about that. He was sort of deep in the sci-fi part of it, and it shifted a little bit over time. First it was Terminator. It was the Terminator. This is it. And then it became, well, they'll treat us like house cats. And then it was like, oh, it's really like you're a builder and we're, you go over an anthill, and if you kill it, you don't think about it. Like, it became that, which I think is probably more accurate. It'll only do what we tell it to do, right?
But how should reporters approach this now based on what you went through those early years?
I am making a heavy, heavy pressure on regulators right now. I spent a lot of time texting regulators saying, what the fuck are you doing?
Do you think people didn't do that enough in the past, not you, broader tech press?
Yes, I think it was, it is an astonishing thing to think about the most powerful companies in the world and the richest people in the world in the history of the world not having any regulation applied to them, and the regulation that applies to them is advantageous, which is Section 230. It's really unusual for the richest people in the world not to be able to be sued at all. Like, really, pretty much. Not everybody.
Yeah. Because again, we've talked about this in Congress, it's not like, again, banking regulations where there's a constituency of lawmakers who want to do more regulations and the banks push back, but there's a push-pull.
Well, but there are regulations, even if
With
they're
tech, it's often like, we don't want to squash innovation.
Right, that's what they do.
And then silence.
Silence, right. We won't squash innovation. And so that's been their excuse, is we won't want to. And honestly, I think what squashed innovation is our reliance on them to self-regulate, and therefore disaster after disaster. And so
Are we headed in the same
I compared
direction?
it a couple of years ago in the New York Times to, I compared Mark Zuckerberg, is like he's got a butcher shop, and he's like, some of the meat is probably going to kill you, but I don't know which one. But it's not my responsibility to worry about the rancid meat. You're just going to have to, good luck, that kind of thing. And he got mad at that. But I felt like that was a good thing. But to me, ultimately, now this guy just wants to make money. And that's why the first line of the book is, so it was capitalism after all. And I think that our regulators are now on the hook, because these people are here for the shareholders.
But they look outmatched, frankly.
They
I look
are
at Sam
outmatched.
Altman, and I just think, I don't
That
know a
is true.
single lawmaker
Yeah.
that is going to get to toe-to-toe with this person,
They're
much
not.
less be toe-to-toe with this
Well, that's the thing. It's astonishing to think the federal government does not have enough power, and they don't. They really don't. I mean, these people have, I jokingly said, I was around some Facebook people, I was like, what are there, like 80 PR people just on me? And they're like, no, 40. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
But
Like,
Joe Biden, in his State of the Union, the president talked about trying to do regulations, I think specifically against voice imitation
yes,
AI.
deep fakes, yeah.
Was that,
Well, that's because he got God. He got God. They did all these things with him.
but is that a moment for someone to,
There all been moments. You know, when there was a moment, the insurrection. Like, look, sorry, it was one of the best pieces I wrote is in 2019. I wrote a column in the New York Times. My first column in the New York Times in 2017, I called them digital arms dealers. That's why I did that column, because I wanted to alert public officials to what was happening. And so I said, these people are really hurting us. I wrote a column before COVID saying they're going to have more power than ever after COVID because we're going to have to rely on them so much, and then they'll be richer, and they'll be trillion-dollar companies, and then we can't stop them. But during 2019, I had gotten very worried about, I had argued with Mark about Alex Jones. He moved into Holocaust now, as I was worried about anti-Semitism. That was a very famous interview where he said Holocaust deniers don't mean to lie, and he wasn't going to take them off this platform. And I said, you are going to reap the rewards of what you're doing here in a very bad way. But the column I wrote was saying, when he loses in 2020, he's going to say it was stolen, and then he's going to make sure he says it over and over again. He's going to radicalize his people. It's going to go up and down the right-wing echo chamber. It's all over the place, the right-wing echo chamber.
I just worry that you've told us a story about people who rise to power virtually unchecked.
Yes.
And once they get there, don't want any kind of
Unchecked.
accountability.
They don't.
You and I have talked about how hard it is for lawmakers to get it together. And now we're staring down this dark tunnel of AI.
This is the most important computing change in the generation.
And you've moved to Washington.
Yes.
To talk more about
Yeah.
regulation.
Yeah.
Are there willing ears? Is there a
There is.
constituency in all of us? Do we care enough, or is it more convenient for us to like order food and helicopters
is
or whatever in the
correct. That
apps
is
than
correct.
to actually deal with this? Because I don't want to be in a love story with flames on it 10 years from
Right,
now. You know what I mean? Like, I would like to get this.
Haven't we all?
I would like to get it right, so to
Yes.
speak.
Well, here's the problem, because it's already inbuilt. The lobbying is astonishing. There is a feeling by, you saw those parents face Mark Zuckerberg the other day.
Right, in the
There is a,
congressional
like,
hearings.
what are you doing? But even that wasn't enough. He didn't apologize. He said, I'm sorry for what happened to you. That is not an apology, as far as I can understand it. And I saw his eyes, and he was quite upset. He's a person. I know he doesn't seem like one, but he is. And I think one of the problems is it's always pushback. And by the way, it's not just Republicans who are just spend their time just cosplaying, like TikTok, let's get them. Like, that's not our biggest problem. It is a problem.
But we are exactly going through this fight on Capitol Hill right now about TikTok.
But guess what? It is a problem. I wrote about it 5 years ago. But what we really need is basic things. Artificial general intelligence safety regulation. A privacy bill would be nice, this 10, 20 years into it, a national privacy bill, a data transparency bill, an algorithmic transparency bill. Like, there's 10 of them. I wrote a story a long time ago called the Internet Bill of Rights and named the 10.
We should say the EU, the European Union,
has acted.
started to act and make more
they have
regulations.
acted.
Why do you think they are able to do it in a way that the US can't?
Because they don't get the benefits from these companies that our country does, right? These are U.S. the financial benefits. They aren't getting the benefits. They're getting a lot of the negatives. They don't get, their governments aren't bought and paid for by these tech companies. And so they are not under as much pressure. And so Marguerite Vestager, I'm actually talking to her next week, is able to put these fines on, and she's not getting pushback. And it's a much more privacy-oriented world over there in Europe. It just is. And so you get that. But here, even, like, literally yesterday, Senator Klobuchar texted me and says, you're not going to believe this. She passed one bill. She had like 10 of them, and she's trying to push them. She's gotten pushed back over and over and over again because the tech companies come after her. And she said, you're not going to believe this. She passed one bill, which was to increase merger fees that companies pay. And the money was supposed to go to the Justice Department and the FTC for lawyers to do antitrust actions where warranted. And she wrote a big book on antitrust, a huge book on antitrust. They took the money, they were trying to strip it out and give it to someone else. The only thing she got was these fees, and it was like $200 million. It's hardly anything. And they're stripping it out.
Trying to divert the fees.
They are trying. She's trying to stop it. But that's how bad it is. She can't even keep something that simple. And so if you think you can't keep that, and that was earmarked for that, and they're stripping it out. And I was like, what are you going to do? She goes, I think they're going to win. You know what I mean? Like, she's exasperated. Really good. Ken Buck, another guy who is Republican, very conservative, frustrated, did a lot of stuff on trying to get privacy bills. David Cicilline, he's gone. He's left Congress. Mike Gallagher, really strong on tech stuff, especially around China, gone. Like, they just can't stay. And then the crazies, you have Marjorie Taylor Greene just trying to get herself on Twitter, get it viral on Twitter, and and then just yells about TikTok and the Chinese. And that's not really
regulation.
Directionally, it's correct. Executionally, it's just a game, so they can make performative statements.
Now, all of you probably have some questions, and we are going to take some questions. Kara's going to answer them. I'll give you some time to think about that while I ask this last one, which is, are you in your activist era?
No, I think I have been. If you go back,
But this is different. Moving to Washington.
Well, I just did because of COVID and children.
No, but I would
be in San Francisco
and now
right
texting
now
with Klobuchar, right? Like,
right.
You're moving into a different territory.
She texted me because she wants me to say something about it.
You didn't block it, okay?
Right,
Just
okay.
accept the premise.
All right, okay.
You're here in Washington.
Yes.
You're burning the relationships.
Yes.
Not that hard because they're like all on the book tour, but
Yes, they are.
you're
Thank you.
speaking more
Yeah,
publicly,
yeah.
and you're speaking
No,
more
only the
publicly.
people I like are on the book tour. Elon and I are not going to be doing appearance together.
That's fair, but
Yeah.
you trust Altman more than I do right now. Let's
Do
just
I?
say
Yeah.
that way.
Well, it's a low bar.
Yeah.
It's a low bar. If I can impact him, sure, I want to impact him. I did say to him last night.
Do you see that? That's why I'm asking. Do you see that also now as part of your work?
Yes. I said to him, I have great hopes that you'll try to at least do, I know it's a big money-making thing for all of you, and you're already a billionaire, so I suppose you have enough money. But I said, I said, if you start down the ugly road of Elon Musk, I'm going to turf you. I think I said that to him. I'm going to turf you. I'm going to try to turf you, at least, kind of thing. So yeah, I think I can
What
have
does turf you mean?
put you down.
Oh, okay.
Put you down. Like, don't get up. Don't get up. That kind of thing. But the idea is, I'm watching you, and I'm hoping for the best from these people, like the new group of people. And look, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are doing climate change.
You're
tech
hoping for
stuff.
the best, but you're ready to take them down for the worst.
Yes, and I think by nature, because the money involved is so big, it's so massive, they're going to want to advantage shareholders. That's what they do. That's what they do. But in doing this, I'm hoping that some of them, and I would say you can find people who do understand the gravity of the situation, like a Satya Nadella at Microsoft. It's not activists. It's more, speaking of CNN, I think Christiane Amanpour, I really like that saying, truthful, not neutral. I'm not neutral about this. And I think we were doing that early on in All Things D, much more than I think people realize. We were starting that idea that you could have a point of view of something. And I will argue my point of view. I don't know if is that activist. Maria Ressa is another person who did Rappler, won the Nobel Prize. In fact, I didn't win the Nobel Prize. But she's talking about this. She was targeted by Duterte, and she is an activist. Is she, or is she just saying, look what's happening to my country because of the abuse of online by Duterte against me, against others, against any kind of anything. And this new year, if Trump wins, he understands the uses of online to manipulate and quash people. And so I see, like, this could go real bad real fast. And that's the whole point that I'm trying to make, is that these are, which I did, I think, with the Star Trek, Star Wars metaphor, which is we could go Star Trek, which is good, or we could go Star Wars, which is bad. But it's not the tech that's the problem, it's the people manipulating the tech. So I guess you could say I'm an activist, I'm an activist for unaccountable power not being unaccountable, and that we should not have private companies running space. We should not have we should be, government people should be involved, and so should citizens. We should not have giant companies control AGI, and that's what they're doing right now. So if I keep saying, hey, government, big companies are controlling AGI, government, what are you going to do about it? Enough times that someone will listen, and they will also listen because they think the people that can do something about it are listening to me, which is often the case, right? That happens a lot.
All right, I want to open it up for questions. We do have a mic, so you just give it a minute as it comes to you.
Perfect. Hello. All right. Hi, I'm Caleb. I'm a sophomore finance student at Dakota School of Business. Kara, thank you so much for coming and taking your time. And Audie, thank you so much for an amazing conversation and for moderating it. I was just thinking, as you're describing your story, you mentioned a lot of things that you just don't like that's going on in the tech industry right now. Some things you even hate.
Yeah.
And I was just curious to know, what is some part of your work that you really love that drives you to keep going?
Oh, I mean, it's very clear. Some of this AGI stuff around healthcare is really promising for people, like not gene editing, but, well, that's coming, but some of the cancer stuff is really like, we're not going to get where we're going to go without AGI helping us get there. I think I'm a real proponent of autonomous vehicles. I know I was just in San Francisco. I got a lot of booze. I'm like, I don't care what you say. People shouldn't be driving. That's it. Like, so I'm a real proponent of that for the energy it saves, electric vehicles, even though, I mean, there's problematic, but it's better than fossil. We have to get off fossil fuels. So I think figuring out how autonomous vehicles work, you need quantum computing is what you need, actually. It's well beyond that. And so if we could figure out a way to do transportation using these computerized systems, it's going to be something like astonishing in terms of efficiency, in terms of saving energy. There's all kinds of ways AGI can really bring efficiencies that are great for the planet. It really is. There's no question. Same thing around education. You could see some really amazing things where you could deliver education in a way that's much different than just searching and finding, which I think years from now, many years ago when I was covering retail, I was in a Circuit City. You don't remember this company, it's gone now. But they used to put up a wall of confusion of TVs, and then you'd go to the one they want to buy. I used to write about this a lot. I'm like, that's the wall of confusion, what they're trying to do there. But I remember thinking, why are we hunting around stores? It doesn't make any sense. There should be more efficient ways of getting goods to people. And you could see a lot of the way we make things, just-in-time manufacturing, getting rid of fast fashion that gets destroyed and is environmental. You can see the links between it. The monitoring of our planet, those are the kind of things that I think are exciting. Drug discovery, drug discovery is going to explode if it's applied correctly. And same thing with drug interactions, it kills a lot of people. And so those are the kind of things that you're like, this stuff will be able to allow us to do it, because there's data everywhere, you just can't understand it. It's not understandable. And doctors, in terms of the stuff the information they can get, there's thousands and thousands of medical journals published every 5 seconds. There's no way your doctor's going to know everything, but then they will. They will have no. And I'll give you an example. My brother is an anesthesiologist, and so if he had a very difficult case, he might consult 3 doctors, right? 2 of whom would be wrong. Like, what should I do here? Here, you should do this, you should do that. Everyone's operating on very limited knowledge, especially doctors, by the way. And they never will admit it, but they are. Anyone who's had anything significant happen to them understand that pretty quickly. I'm not calling them stupid, but I just think they don't know, and they don't like to say they don't know. And so, and now he uses AGI. He puts the inputs, liver transplant, this, and he gets 20 to 30 different answers, 10 of which are not good, but 10 of which he never thought of. It's crazy. He's like, oh yeah, and and so then he can access knowledge and then check it. You can't rely on it necessarily, and it goes in really ugly directions too. It can go in very misinformation directions, like the deep fake of his voice. That's why he mentioned it, because Biden's voice. I had the experience on this book. This book is popular. It's number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list. What happened? AIDS, thank you. There's a crazy right-wing person at number 1, so we need to get rid of him, to move him aside. There's always a crazy right-wing person in front of at the top of these lists. And so what happened was they made fake Kara Swisher books with fake Kara Swishers, with all these weird AGI pictures of me that were very femmy, which is crazy. But they were all over Amazon, and my wife Amanda found them, and she's like, what is this? I was like, what are you talking about? And then it was there. They generated books in seconds. It's really, they can just push a button and there's 20 books. And what they do is they upload them to Amazon. They can upload them every 3 hours.
Have you read any of them?
I looked at a sample inside, just to pay them money for it.
No, I just wondered if they were like prompt, write a story in the style of Kara Swisher.
Everything, yes, that's correct. And so, and with my history, but it's a lot of errors, of course, but that's okay. It's going to get more
But I hear you
accurate.
saying synthesis of wide amounts of data.
I'm out there a lot.
Efficiency. So thank you for this question.
So, So.
Cara and Audrey, thank you so much for being here. My name's Mel. I work for The Guardian newspaper. I've also just moved to DC. I wanted to get your advice on what you think the publishing industry should be doing in 2024. We've got a huge presidential election. We've got a UK general election. There's a lot happening in the world right now, and local news is shutting down every day. Premium national news publishers are, announcing layoffs left, right, and centre every single day. And, this is obviously a direct result of big tech platforms taking all the advertising revenue away. The consumption of news is no longer coming directly to publishers. It's being consumed, obviously, across different platforms. I'd love your advice on, I guess, what should the publishing industry do apart from bashing platforms all the time? Because they don't usually respond well to that.
Oh, I think a lot of the issues are media companies themselves. The people that running them shouldn't be running them. It's all older, whiter men, and it just is. And they don't understand what's happening. For years, I literally did yell at them. I was like, are you understand now? And then a couple of years ago, I'm like, they're going to get all their news on TikTok. Come on, this is really good. It's done really well. It's algorithmic. one of the things they did is they ignored technology and ignored it and decided not to invest in it in any way.
And that's almost cyclical.
It's always cyclical.
Like they just over and over
They
again. We don't have to worry about
Look
this.
up Pathfinder for
Yeah.
Time magazine. It was crazy. And they think it's an afterthought. It's the center of everything, right? They do operate on a different economic scale. Tech companies got the valuations that they didn't get. You know, media companies get 3 times valuation. Tech companies get 60, 70 times value. It just creates a non-economic situation for them that they can't pay. They thought tech companies were their friends. They thought they weren't carnivorous Borgs. And they didn't think tech companies wanted to get into entertainment, but they do. They want to get into media. They just don't want to make news. They don't want to create news. They just want to eat everything up and spit it out. And so they made all kinds of errors over and over and over again. And now the situation you have is you can talk about CNN, you can talk about anyone, the costs are out of line with the revenues. That's it. It's really quite basic. And one thing I did, there's a lot of smaller companies. We really pioneered this. We were always making money. I always made sure that I made money so I could tell people to go fuck themselves. Like, that's the best thing when you make money. Like, I had, every now and then, some Rupert Murdoch minion would come over to me when we were at the Journal, which is why we left, because I was sick of them coming over to me. And they'd go, Kara, and I'm like, did you not get the $1 million I sent you? Go away. Like, did I not? You go, get away from me. But still, they wouldn't invest. That was my issue. They wouldn't invest. I literally had the best idea that they would have dominated, and they wouldn't give me the money. It was crazy. And then I'm like, what do I need them for? Like, whatever. And I think it really is problematic. It's CNN. I'm not going to tell you who, but I was seeing some of the salaries. I don't know how much you make, but I'm not sure in these numbers.
You probably didn't see me on whatever list that
No, you
was. I
weren't.
can tell you that much.
But I saw some of the salaries, and I'm like, why are you earning this? I think even Don Lemon, I saw him, he did an
We know
event
now
for me,
after
too,
a
what he
settlement,
said.
yeah.
And I go, what did you do worth $20 million, Don? And he's like, well, I was like, no, you didn't. Like, just so you know. Like, good for you for getting the money and getting fired so spectacularly and benefiting from it. You know, you should send them all flowers. But like, I can't understand where the 20 million comes from, because it's not just 20 million, it's 20 million, you have to double it because of cost. I was like, you're not worth 20 million. There's just not. There's no way it's happening. And so when you look at those numbers, it's not a surprise. And even the New York Times, which is considered the gold standard, only makes $2.4 billion in revenue, and their profits are very low. They're 124 million. I forget what it is, but it's not a lot. And so they're the gold standard. That's a problem. The economics are not. Now we don't own digital advertising. We don't understand the algorithms. We resist the platforms, which we have to. And like, my son watches everything on YouTube. So get on YouTube.
I'm going to give you a ray of light, because it sounds very bleak,
Yeah.
which is that
What?
I'm still heartened by the fact that especially young people still seek out content and news itself.
That is true.
They still want it. We're in business because people still like listening to 2 people talk.
Yeah, they do.
No matter how many
That's not the
doodads, no
problem.
matter what it is, people still want to hear storytelling, people still want to see
Always.
reporting, and even on TikTok, when someone is like, I'm talking about Ukraine, here's a picture of me, get ready with me, putting on makeup, they're just doing a market demand, but they're still trying to provide a service. So it's not the service that's the problem, it's not the content that's the problem.
Some of the content's the problem.
Some of the content's
You know
the
what I'm
problem. Oh,
talking
yeah. But I am heartened by the fact that there are still people who want the news, and I meet scores of young people who still want to make it, even as I tell them to go to law school.
Yeah.
They still say they're interested in the news
like,
business.
There's a ton of small operations that are very exciting that actually kind of copied the All Things D and did different things with it that are great, but they're small. They're very tight. Like, I have.
But they're entrepreneurial.
Yeah, I have 3 people working on my podcast that makes millions and millions of dollars in profit, and because I have 3, that's it, kind of thing. And everyone's like, why don't you expand? I'm like, because I want to make money. Like, I don't need it. I don't need it. And so it's
And
real
that
hard.
might mean a smaller newsroom in the future.
That's right.
There is
Yeah.
something to be said
But
for
I
the
think
fact.
there needs to be innovation in the way they present news,
Yeah.
cable news in particular. Like, I do text Mark Thompson and I write paint drying because it's so boring. I was like, what are you doing? Repeating, there's 45 seconds of news in this 6-hour block right here. Like, what are you doing? Let's try something fresh. And he laughs. He's like, so paint dries.
She can send that text. I'm
Yeah.
not there yet. I'm not there yet. We have one more question.
I tried
think
to
you
get
had
her
your
to say
hand up for a
something rude
while.
on the air. I said I would pay her
Hey,
money.
this will be the last question.
Yeah, you were waiting.
Hi, I'm Tom Meenan, interested citizen and a big fan. I've heard you speak many times. I loved your Ron Klain interview.
That was good, yeah.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. And while on politics, brief side, I loved your commentary on the Republican response last night. Jonathan Capehart, in lead up to a much more substantive answer, said he thought she was channeling Elle Woods.
Oh,
which I
yeah.
think really nailed it.
Whatever.
I worked on Capitol Hill for a long
The problem
time.
that she had is it became viral that she was an idiot. That was really problematic, which I was like, thank you, Internet. Well done. When the Internet does that, you're like, well done.
I worked on the Hill for a long time, and one of the more interesting oversight projects I had was creating the first U.S. Senate website for the
wow.
institution.
Okay.
And I should write about it, and many a tale therein. But I would describe the institutional approach at that time as a combination of sort of like feet to the fire, paranoia, and more than anything, loss of control and fear
Yeah.
of that. And to some extent, it's probably still true. You know, for example, initially we were only allowed to put up FTP files and
Yeah, I remember.
a Gopher. We're probably the only
Gopher,
people in
of
the room
course,
who know
yeah.
what Gopher was. But and the same year that this went up, 1995, Gingrich killed a wonderful entity called the Office of Technology Assessment, OTA. Which it was a sort of a
Heard about that,
corollary
Post.
to Congressional Research Service, independent of CRS, but did wonderful research created by a really innovative, forward-looking Congress in '72, which those are terms we don't often associate with Congress anymore. So I'm sort of, based on some of what you said, I guess it wouldn't matter if OTA existed now anyway, because
I have
legislation isn't going anywhere. But
Yeah,
where do they go now for
I have
substantive?
advocated for a new department around
Okay.
information, but there's so much nervousness around First Amendment and free speech. They mix up free speech with data. Like, there's an FTC, FTC can't handle all this, neither can the Justice Department. I think there should be a regulatory body for tech companies. I do, because there's all kinds of issues but what happens is, you know, an endless chode like Tom Cotton or Josh Hawley starts to go free speech. Sorry, he is an endless chode. And smart, so it's really irritating because he knows what he's saying. And so, you know, there should be some sort of regulatory body, but there's an anathema to creating a new regulatory body. But if any industry called for a bureaucracy, this one might
Yeah,
have
it's
one.
very difficult. I
it'll
think
never
the most
happen.
recent, well, there was the Consumer Protection Bureau, which
Right, but they're
is
still going at that.
Elizabeth.
The
Yeah,
minute
but it
they can kill
exists,
it.
right?
Yeah,
It's
but
like it's like erecting a new monument. It's just
Yeah.
very hard to say.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to do anything. And so they have to, you know, my feeling right now is the way we're going to have to do it is the reform of 230 in some fashion, although getting rid of it is not going to work correctly. That's good. That would be disastrous.
Does the movement of parents who have become very aggressive about 230 help?
Yes, it does, but I mean, they're either going to chip away at it or rewrite it in some way that has some protection for unlimited liability, which is a problem. But I always, at this point, I'm like, let's let the lawyers sue them. I mean, ultimately, when Mark looked at those parents can't sue him. And I'll give two things that should happen. One is, I interviewed one of the Sandy Hook parents, and that's not really my area of expertise, but I was very interested in how they won the case. They got Facebook to take stuff down. It wasn't through decency, which should have been their move. It wasn't through that it was a lie. You know, these were lies about their children. It was because they took the children's pictures that were owned by the parents, and they sued on copyright grounds, which are very strong laws in this country. That was fascinating. And he explained the whole thing of how he did it. He also explained how he went to each person who was doing these sites and met with them. And it turned out to be a lot of mothers who couldn't believe it was true, young mothers. And so they were so upset they got radicalized. So it must be a lie what happened to those children. He turned a lot of them personally, which I thought was really interesting because they got online radicalized. That was super interesting to me. So copyright laws are very protective. But I do think when I looked at, you know, look, Donald Trump lost in court to E. Jean Carroll. He got to be sued. Whether he gets off by the stupid judge in Florida or whatever, it doesn't matter. He's in court, right? We get to haul his ass into court all the time. Because it's all a witch hunt, all of it, every one of them. It's sort of so strange that people believe that. But you can't haul Mark Zuckerberg into court for these dead children who might have been infected by social media. And even if they lose, they should have their day in court, right? But they can't. So I think at this point, liability is the area I focus in on. Let's sue them. Let's figure out a way to sue the bastards. And if they win, they win. If they lose, they lose. That's it, like kind of thing. And I think, maybe we're there on that. That might happen.
Yeah.
There might be some liability. And then let the lawyers go to town on it. And there'll be a lot of lawyers that'll go to town on it,
Yeah.
which will be great, right? So go to law school.
Well, I want to thank you all for your
Thank
questions
you.
and your time, and I want to thank the Kara Swisher.
Thank you so much.
Amazing, wonderful.
Yes, and I got one more round of applause for these incredible women who spent their day with us today. I'm sorry, I know we could go on and on, but never fear, on April 5th, you can come back and hear more from
Yes,
Kara,
I'm going to
so
interview Larry Hogan, so.
Oh.
do it. And so I always say it's more important sometimes what we do when we leave the room than when we have these great experiences here. So Audie, thank you so much for bringing your voice to American University's campus. I encourage all of you to seek her voice out.
Her
Go to
podcast
her
is
on-
amazing.
To her podcast, go
thank you.
to the work she's doing and support that. Sign up for April 5th. Buy a book, buy another one. They make great gifts, I hear.
They
So,
do, yeah.
and if we all work together, we'll get you to #1
That
very
is
soon.
correct. That's the goal.
And so thank you for spending the time today. We have a lovely reception outside. The other thing is when you leave this room, something that triggered an interesting thought, something that share it with people, convene, get together, talk about these issues because they matter to all of us. And again, thank you both so much for taking the time today. We appreciate you.
Thank you.